Good morning and welcome to Rising. We have, of course, another great show for you today. What were you expecting? Hello, Niall, Stanage. How you doing?
I am good, Robby. And are you sorted out with your days of the week now? You're clear it's Wednesday?
I know today is Wednesday because today is the day of my showdown with Ryan Grimm and Emily Jashinsky. We're doing a debate on big tech, good or bad, tonight in Washington, D.C. I don't know if there's still tickets left if you're interested in coming, but you can look for that online, and then it will eventually be posted online.
Surely already sold out with that all-star lineup, Robby, I would have thought. But anyway, that should be good.
Yes.
Coming up on Rising, CBS has selected a new anchor for the network's evening news show.
Plus, potential Democratic presidential candidate Rahm Emanuel says the U.S. should follow Australia's lead and ban social media for all teenagers. We'll discuss that.
And President Trump gave a speech on the economy in Pennsylvania yesterday evening. I'll be recapping that in my notes. But before we get to all of that, Robby, lead us off. What is on your radar?
Here we go. The European Union has hit Elon Musk's X with millions of dollars in fines, and conservatives are very angry about it. And in my view, they're right to be upset. Now, President Donald Trump isn't happy either. Here he was bashing the EU.
Whoa, that's a nasty one. I don't know. Elon has not called me to ask for help on that one. But no, that's a tough thing. I don't think it's right. No, I don't think it's right. I don't see, how they can do that. No, I'm not. I'll speak about it later. I'm going to get a full report on it. Look, Europe has to be very careful. They're doing a lot of things. We want to keep Europe Europe. Europe is going in some bad directions. It's very bad for the people. We don't want Europe to change so much. They're going in some very bad directions. That was a big thing.
I'm with Trump. European bureaucrats who depend on the U.S. for so much, including quite literally our money and our military, well, they should tread carefully here as they sanction an American company and an American businessman for practicing the American values of free speech. Western values, not just American values. Now, in the EU's telling, here is what X did wrong in violation of European policies. The EU ruled that X's blue checkmark system is deceptive because anyone can purchase a checkmark, which in their view enables scams, impersonations, and manipulations by malicious actors. The fine for that was $52 million. The EU also hit X for not making information on political ads available to researchers, which was another $40 million. And then the EU said that X obstructed independent researchers' access and limited scrutiny of information relating to political content and hate speech. The dollar amount for that, $46 million. Okay, but let's be real. The issue is that the bureaucrats of Brussels don't like that X refuses to restrict political speech that government deems hateful or misinformed, and they're looking for excuses to ding X without coming straight out and admitting that their problem is, in fact, the content. Does anyone think the government should be able to compel a social media site to collaborate with researchers who are desperately trying to prove that the site is more evil than ever? Well, of course not. Transparency is nice. Of course it's nice. We can encourage big tech to practice it. But at the end of the day, it's also important for social media sites to be able to protect our data and our speech from unfriendly authoritarian governments. Look no further than the massive push to erase anonymity online, something already well underway in the UK due to the Online Safety Act. If the bureaucrats get their way, well, you'll be fully identified in all your social media posts, and if you say anything unkind about a political figure or a group of people or about the system in general, well, they'll either come after you or they'll come after Elon, I guess. This is why, by the way, that there's no tech industry to speak of in Europe. All the most promising minds know that only the US's regulatory environment gives enough permission to innovators to be successful. But it doesn't need to be this way. I'd prefer if it wasn't America standing alone against China's foray into these technologies, social media, and also AI, don't forget AI. Europe should be right behind us. That's why I think Trump's right to say that, look, it's got to be a two-way street. Europe wants the U.S. to lead, for instance, when it comes to Russia-Ukraine. We're told not to turn our backs on Europe. Okay, that sounds fine to me, I agree. But it means European leaders have to play ball. Free speech matters to us. It's our First Amendment, and we're the superpower. The Western world wants to put on a brave face and work together to oppose despotism around the world. We can't have this one exception where a form of despotism to us is allowed to flourish within the coalition, particularly when it impacts American companies. Now look, in the scheme of things, these are not particularly steep fines. Elon can write a check. Best case scenario, maybe this was Brussels' symbolic attempt to shake their finger at Elon and I hope, move on from this singular crusade against free speech on X. Because if it escalates much beyond this, it could put the U.S.-European alliance in jeopardy. Elon might not be Trump's top political advisor anymore, but they are still buddies after all. I wanted to leave plenty of time for discussion here.
Yes. I feel there's a European-US chasm running right between us here. Look, I don't agree with that. I think you put the point of view very well. But first of all, the use of terms like despotism to describe what I would consider common sense measures to guard against things like defamation or incitement to violence, while at the same time permitting very free-flowing discussion or debate about political or public life issues, I think it is fine. You and I have different views on things like the appropriate strength of defamation laws and what should constitute that. The other point that I would disagree about is this is not a case that just came out of thin air where European bureaucrats were trying to invent a case just to nail Musk or nail X. There are these regulations in the EU about things like identifying advertisers, knowing who's paying for certain advertising that appears, for example. That was one of the three things that they were caught on. Similarly, the issue of verifying identities and not leaving a vulnerability where people can fraudulently purport to be other people. Those seem legitimate things to guard against, and whether I personally think they're legitimate or not, it does not seem unreasonable to me for a nation, or in this case a federation of nations, to have laws that companies which operate in their bailiwick have to comply with. I mean, the United States has those laws, and European or Asian or African countries can't just come here, set up operations and say, no, we should only be governed by the laws of our native country.
Well, that's true, but then we could say, okay, no more military dollars. Right? We can exercise our influence in the region to say that, sorry, free speech, a broader free speech ethos than what the EU is prepared to do. Again, not leaps and bounds different. To your point, despotism, yeah, maybe I'm being very zealous about my free speech, but yeah, it's not the same as communist China or Russia or something, or North Korea. But, and I agree with you on defamation and incitement, but it is notable, I think, that they didn't proffer examples. I mean, one can point to examples. There's a famous case of Facebook very much being guilty of a genocide of the Rohingya Muslim population because they failed to take down content that was very inflammatory about those people in Southeast Asia. Those examples were not being offered. What it was examples of, well, I mean, the verification thing is very tricky because, so X allows you to be verified, but you have kind of an anonymous handle or some nickname and it's not saying who you are. Again, in America, we say that's Publius is, offering opinions about what the founding documents should say, and it's James Madison, but you don't need to know that. Like, that's kind of part of our history. And then the whole collaborating with the researchers is probably the thing that bothers me most, because some of those researchers are just political activists who want the sites destroyed, including the Global Disinformation Index, a British nonprofit that labeled my site, Reason Magazine, a spreader of misinformation based on falsehoods, based on incorrect information. So, yes, they can more militantly force the sites to take down inflammatory content. We in the U.S. have a slightly different legal regime for social media, whereby in most cases, not all cases, but in most of the cases, the person who makes the post is the person liable for the post, not the platform. And we have these debates about whether that's a good system. That's not entirely the system, because if there's child pornography, it's not just the person who puts it up, you actually have to take that down under the law. If you have copyright violations, you get a time period. You have 30 days to take this down. I actually think that system is a little bit underrated and could be applied to some of these other edge cases that come up, that you'll get a takedown window and you can take it down. So that can allow sites or people on sites to be permissive, and then if they get in trouble, take it down.
Yeah, I mean, I take those points. I don't think those are invalid points to raise. I suppose my heckles tend to be raised by the portrayal of Europe by some of the kind of Elon people in this country, because, you know, they'll say, for example, somebody was jailed for a Facebook post, and you look at the Facebook post and it's somebody encouraging others to, like, burn a hotel that migrants are in or something. It's like, that's not, you know, that's obvious.
I mean, I think the best criticism of Elon or of the people making this argument that I've seen on social media is that, well, the stand against the European Union has been very, you know, bold and courageous by Elon, in my view. The stand against Brazil was like that. But where's this similar strident defense of free speech when China or India or someone else says, hey, we want this taken down?
Yeah, certain countries are too big for Elon to take on, I think. That's basically the problem, or the markets are too big. Up next, a potential Democratic presidential candidate says that the US should follow Australia's lead and ban social media for teens. We'll be right back to discuss that.
Former Obama White House Chief of Staff Rahm Emanuel suggests a dramatic change for how kids interact with social media. He doesn't want them to interact at all, I guess.
Emanuel, who is mulling over a potential White House bid, says he believes the US should implement a social media ban, similar to the one that you may have heard Australia is rolling out this week. Under that new policy, Australian teens under the age of 16 are not able to hold accounts on social media platforms, and it requires social media companies to take, quote, reasonable steps to ensure children under 16 cannot set up those accounts. The idea is meant to protect children from addiction to the platforms, which experts say can be disastrous to their mental health. The ban has widespread support in Australia. When it was being discussed last year, a YouGov poll showed that roughly 3 out of 4 respondents were in favour of the ban. And Australian officials say it could be the example by which the rest of the world follows, something that Emanuel says should happen as soon as possible. Take a listen.
Australia is banning all TikTok, Instagram, and all social media from kids that are 16 and younger. I think it's time for America to pick up its game and do the same. Look, when it comes to our adolescents, it's either going to be adults or the algorithms. One of them is going to raise the kids. And I think we need to help parents. When it came to taking telephones out of classrooms, we've seen progress. When it came to restricting tobacco from our kids, we've seen progress. When it came to the designated driver, we've seen progress in protecting the safety and the development of our children. So today I'm calling for the United States to follow suit.
In the wake of the rollout, 2 Australia teenagers joined a constitutional challenge to the law, and Reddit is reportedly planning to sue. Critics of that law say the ban will have a disproportionate effect on teens living in remote areas or young people who are disabled or minorities who found online communities through social media. On top of that, several human rights organizations say that a blanket ban is just very unlikely to be effective. Amnesty International told the New York Times, quote, many young people will no doubt find ways to avoid the restrictions. Amnesty International said in a statement on Wednesday, a ban simply means they will continue to be exposed to the same harms, but in secret, leaving them at even greater risk. My number one reaction to this is, okay, Rahm Emanuel, we can't do this here. I think it just so obviously violates the First Amendment that it's not even worth talking about doing. Explain to me how this could possibly be constitutional if banning violent video games from kids under 16. California tried to do that in recent memory, in like 20 years ago. State of California did that, said you couldn't sell violent video games to people under that age. And the Supreme Court said in a decision authored by Antonin Scalia, the conservative on the court, that violent video games are speech. They are like literature. That'd be the same as trying to ban Grimm's fairy tales or something. You can't do that. Parents can restrict them, whatever, but the state can't do it. It's straightforward First Amendment violation. If that's the case, I don't possibly see how social media could be any different. I know there are some harms to teenagers. I fully support classrooms should not have phones. And who is making the argument? I get really annoyed with that. Like, well, so you're saying phones should be? No, of course not. That's preposterous. But the idea that you could, and maybe some kids shouldn't have phones, and that's fine, but that's just got to be for their families to decide. You can't tell me that there could be a 15-year-old who is trying to stay up to date on what's going on in the rest of the world, as is getting news and information from TikTok, or what is watching Rising. They're watching Rising on their phone, and you're trying to tell me that should be illegal? It's just so obviously wrong to me. I don't even know where to begin.
So, I mean, I'm not, first of all, you've written and spoken a lot about this issue, and what I think you generally consider, though you acknowledge some dangers, you think there's quite a lot of scaremongering around
Tremendous amount of
social media.
Well, this is he says TikTok first. These are people, they don't like the information that kids are getting about the Middle East. That's number one complaint of the people who want to ban this.
Yeah, and I mean, that would get us down a whole other avenue, but it's this constant thing that it's all the social media platforms' fault rather than the underlying action. But I'm just thinking through your argument about the video games and all of that. Does that apply right across the board? I mean, do young people have a constitutionally protected right to view pornography, for example?
I don't know what the Supreme Court would say. They would say no. They would say that is lurid, prurient content. That can be regulated by, I know it when I see it. The Supreme Court has taken a different view of gross sexual content than no, that can absolutely be regulated. That has been the Supreme Court's view.
Sure.
So, pornography, yes.
But violent video games?
Violence, no.
Okay.
I mean, it can be restricted. It can be. We have the the rating system for video games have a rating system.
Right.
Movies have a rating system. There are some things you can do, but to require what age verification of the social media sites? First, also, this is just not going to work.
Right.
Like, there are so many ways around this. It's the idea that you would actually be able to effectively gatekeep young people off of social media, unless you implement truly draconian measures where we have to scan our driver's license or social
birth
security
certificate
numbers
or something.
every time you log on, which then creates for the rest of us. Because remember, there's no way to just require this of young people. You're making all of us do this.
Right.
And you're taking away a core function of the internet, which in my view is to protect on some level anonymous speech.
Before, I know we're going to, as always, run out of time here, but before we finish this, I mean, just in terms of the dangers, I'm trying to think if I have the right guy as your nemesis. Is it Jonathan Haidt? You've had quite a few arguments.
Yes.
Now, his argument, I think, is in part that mental and emotional difficulties on the part of teens correlate very closely to the explosion of social media use.
Right.
You think that's factually wrong, or you think from a libertarian perspective that may be right, but it just shouldn't be restricted?
Well, both. I think the data is much less clear on this than the advocates make it seem. There are also other explanations for an explosion in negative self-reported mental health, which is that having negative psychology or victimhood is
more common.
Cool.
It's become
going
cool.
way out. I mean, 60% of Stanford students say they're disabled on their tests. They're mentally disabled so they get more time. And then also that if you look closely, you see that, yes, people who are chronically on social media, young people, young girls who are on Instagram all the time, have much worse mental health outcomes. But that doesn't, to me, that's an argument for limiting theirs or their parents limiting theirs. It's not an argument for taking away people who are using social media in a healthy way and in a productive way. Mm-hmm. I mean, we'd have to, on some level, say that just information is bad for people, which I don't know how you can conclude that in a free society and then don't have the rest of the architecture of your views collapse.
Yeah, I just wonder what we do on the mental health question to the extent that it does exist. But in any event, another topic.
Next up, a report has been released detailing the behavior of Congresswoman Nancy Mace at a South Carolina airport. We'll look at that right after this. Representative Nancy Mace is trashing GOP leadership and asking, what's the point of Congress? It's a great question. In a recent op-ed for the New York Times, Congresswoman has been in office for nearly 5 years, but could be giving up her seat maybe as she runs to be the next governor of South Carolina.
She expresses deep frustrations with the inner workings of Congress in her op-ed, and she accuses House Speaker Mike Johnson of failing to listen to the women in his party. She writes, quote, a small number of lawmakers negotiate major legislation behind closed doors and spring it on members with little notice or opportunity for input. Leadership promises members their provisions will be in a bill, then strips them out in final drafts. Speaker Mike Johnson is better than his predecessor, she adds, but the frustrations of being a rank-and-file House member are compounded as certain individuals or groups remain marginalised within the party, getting little say. Women will never be taken seriously until leadership decides to take us seriously, and I'm no longer holding my breath. Meanwhile, Mace continues to deal with the fallout from an incident that went viral where she was accused of verbally assailing workers at the Charleston International Airport.
An internal investigation said the airport does bear some responsibility because officers were incorrectly informed of what vehicle Mace would be arriving in, which led to this delay, but the airport still found that Mace was ultimately at fault for the incident because of her behavior at the TSA checkpoint. Now, the report obtained by the Washington Post concludes her continued failure to follow established procedures at the checkpoint is what turned a minor miscommunication over the color of a vehicle into the spectacle that this issue has become for our employees and airport workers.
Mace, however, continues to deny that she ever screamed expletives at workers. She even accused the police report of being at least partially falsified. And she says the whole thing is a, quote, political hit job from South Carolina Attorney General Alan Wilson. Nancy.
I don't know about that. Well, it's kind of a he said, she said situation.
It's not that much of a he said,
quite
she said.
doubt that her behavior at this airport was a little embarrassing for her. It all behooves us to keep our cool at the airport, even as we are very frustrated by TSA sometimes. I get it.
But she does seem to have done a don't you know who I am thing.
Exactly.
Do you do that when you're frustrated? Do you say, I'm the co-host of Rising,
I do
let
not.
me through?
I do not. Although, not that I'm identified all the time, but the most likely place where someone would go, oh my God, you're on Rising, I love Rising, is at the airport. It's happened to me at a couple different airports. Now, though we have criticized Nancy Mace's personal conduct and some of the issues she seems to be going through of a psychological nature, I thought the op-ed was perfectly good, and I agreed with it, and Congress has become useless, and it's leadership. It's mostly on the leadership, refusing to let amendments be brought to the floor, refusing to let actual debate happen. Nothing gets voted on unless leadership has already signed off on it. Mike Johnson is far from the first person to behave in that way, as she notes, but is well in keeping with that tradition. And I don't know that it's a women versus others thing exactly. That is a through line that the mainstream media is pushing. We tried to ask Amber about that the other day, and she demurred. She would not give a strong view.
Going to be too collectivized on this, but I do think it is interesting the fact that Mace and Marjorie Taylor Greene and others have made that specific argument. The broader argument about Congress and proper procedures being followed and whether it is open enough to members' points of view, all those are perfectly normal and kind of standard arguments. The op-ed under someone else's name would probably not have caused any stir because they're so well established arguments. But it is interesting to see these Republican women arguing that women within their conference are being kind of marginalized.
Yeah.
Yes, we'll see. Up next, President Trump gave a speech on the economy yesterday, and he may have handed a gift to Democrats. I'll discuss more of that in my notes. Stick around for that.
All right, Niall, what's in your notes today?
Well, Robby, last night, President Trump went to Pennsylvania to give a speech. The word in advance of that speech was that it would address the concerns that so many Americans have over the cost of living. But before the president began this supposed effort to reconnect with everyday folks and their money worries, he limbered up by giving an interview to Politico, and he spoke with Dasha Burns. There weren't many signs that he feels people's pain. Let's watch.
Economy, sir, here at home, and I wonder what grade you would give
A+.
economy. A+.
Yeah, A++++++.
Well, it's interesting.
Now, of course, this kind of braggadociousness will raise a smile with some. Donald Trump, it would be fair to say, has never been overly encumbered by modesty. But the kind of hyperbole that could maybe be seen as amusing when the Trump of the 1980s boasted about his buildings or his casinos is a lot less amusing when he's president and millions of Americans are in real economic distress. It wasn't as if Trump's Politico interview was a one-off. He seemed extremely reluctant last week to acknowledge there is any problem at all with prices. And that attitude resulted in him handing this gift to Democrats.
But the word affordability is a Democrat scam. They say it and then they go into the next subject. And everyone thinks, oh, they had lower prices. No, they had the worst inflation in the history of our country.
Now, before we get to the scam part of that comment a brief fact check, because those are always useful when a president invents false facts as easily and as often as Trump does. Inflation under Joe Biden was certainly high, but it was not close to the highest inflation in the history of the United States. Higher inflation was seen in the early 1980s and in 1974 and just after the Second World War. More to the point, inflation under Biden had come down roughly 2/3 by January of this year, from a peak of 9.1% to 3%. January is of course when Trump took office, and inflation is unchanged since then. The most recent figures we have from September show it's still at 3%. All of that is bad news for a president who won last year's election, in part on his promises to bring prices down fast, on day one, as he sometimes said. But the scam comment we just watched was an even bigger political problem, because even for Trump, it's politically just dumb to tell voters to disbelieve what they're seeing and feeling every day of their lives. In Pennsylvania last night, Trump came at least a bit closer than he normally does to admitting an error on that point. Sort of. Let's watch.
And the word affordability is the exact same thing. And I can't say affordability hoax because I agree the prices were too high, so I can't go to hoax because they'll misconstrue that. But they use the word affordability, and that's their only word. They say affordability, and everyone says, oh, that must mean Trump has high prices. No, our prices are coming down tremendously.
Once again, prices are not coming down tremendously or otherwise. Those latest figures for September showed the unadjusted price of beef up year on year by almost 15%, coffee by almost 19%, bananas by almost 7%. And, by the way, rent, usually the biggest expense for the many millions of Americans who don't own their own homes, was up 3.4%. Trump's blame Biden strategy seems to be running out of steam fast as well. A Fox News poll last month asked registered voters whether Biden or Trump is more responsible for the state of the economy. 62% said Trump, while just 32% said Biden. And that same Fox poll had even worse news for the president. It asked whether people felt they had been personally helped or hurt by Trump's economic policies. Only 15%, 1/5, said they had been helped. More than 3 times as many, 46%, said they had been hurt. Does Trump have a plan? That's unclear. Earlier this week, he announced a $12 billion bailout for farmers. That is, 12 billion taxpayer dollars handed over to ease a problem that was caused in large part by Trump's own tariff policies. But never fear, if tariff pressures ramp up further, the president has a belt-tightening plan. Let's hear more about that.
You can give up certain products. You can give up pencils. Because under the China policy, you know, every child can get 37 pencils. They only need 1 or 2, you know. They don't need that many. But you always need steel.
Trump's bumper sticker, I don't feel your pain, but buy fewer pencils. I'm not really sure that that's the slogan many Republicans want to run on when they face an angry nation in next year's midterms.
Ooh, I had not seen that clip yet of the you don't need that many choices of pencils.
Yeah.
Oh, that is a real bad message in my view. Frankly, it's a message I associate with like Bernie Sanders and the left.
Supply controls, state controls.
Limits, well, you don't need more choices for, was it shaving cream or whatever that came up? That's what some people on the very hard left say, that capitalism is creating all these choices and we don't need that and it's confusing and disorienting. So leave that talking point behind. I agree with this notes of yours.
There we go. Wonders will never cease, Robby. Happens once in a while.
Topic where we're on the same page, indeed. Bailing out farmers, I hate this. Making their situation worse with the tariffs and then giving them a bailout. Just don't do the tariffs in the first place and you wouldn't need to do the bailout. Bailouts are bad. The tariffs are bad. he knows he can't, I'm glad he recognizes he can't call affordability crisis a hoax because affordability is not good enough. But yes, Democrats are talking about it. To defang this talking point, you're going to need to do more. It's been a year. You get a year when you win an election. You've had a year. The inflation is better, but it's not fixed, and the prices are still bad. And it's just as clear as day that the tariffs, if you had not done the tariffs are going to tank the rest of the agenda because Republicans lost with the Miami. We had these
Miami
special
mayoral
elections last
election,
night. Miami mayoral election for the first time in 30 years. We know exactly what the problem is. The problem is that it's not necessarily that everyone is swapping back to the Democratic Party, but Trump can't turn out when he's not on the ballot. His converted, less likely to vote people. And also there are swing voters out there who believed what Trump was going to do for the economy, particularly young people, I think, and have not been sold. And it's the tariffs. It's not just the tariffs, but that's the big one, where he has charged full steam ahead with a policy that everyone who knows anything about economics advised was going to be a problem. And here we are.
I think that point about the uncommitted or swing voters politically is a very important one because, look, obviously we talk about Trump almost every day on here. For a massive swathe of the population, their views of him are very, very fixed, be that positively or negatively.
And that's the kind of people we interact with in our daily lives as media reporters. So it's funny to picture this vast mass of people who are like, I could go either way on Donald Trump, but they exist and they decide the election.
Right, and they often decide their votes on economic conditions, which is, of course, a completely valid grounds to decide those 100%. On. And the inflation that had taken place under Biden obviously hurt him, and then, of course, by extension, Kamala Harris, when she took over the ticket in those circumstances. So I think that for people who voted for Trump because they believed he would improve their economic lives, he would put more money in their pockets. That looks a very dodgy bet now. And yes, he is constitutionally prohibited, whatever Steve Bannon might think, about running for a third term. But I do think it has the capacity to hurt Republicans generally in elections.
Yeah, it's so the tariffs. I actually saw Elizabeth Warren yesterday tweet something about how shoe prices have gone up massively, and how she, of course, for her agenda, it has to be because there's been consolidation in the shoe industry. And I looked it up a little bit. No, it's entirely due to the tariffs. That's the vast majority, a huge, massive increase in shoe prices. That is true, what she said, but the reason is just the tariffs. We got it. Republicans, Trump, someone to get to him, we got to fix the tariffs. The whole administration, the whole agenda will collapse if they don't get sane on this policy.
We were just admiring our studio manager, Kit's enormously flamboyant footwear today. We must ask her whether tariffs have hit footwear prices.
We'll have to ask about the price of that. Good idea.
CBS has selected a new anchor for their evening news show, and it's someone who also caught Barry Weiss's eye before. Stay with us for that. The CBS Evening News is going to have a new face. Tony Dokoupil, currently co-host of the network's morning show, CBS Mornings, will fill the prestigious anchor seat starting in the new year.
It comes after current co-anchors John Dickerson and Maurice Dubois both recently announced their intentions to leave the show at the end of the year. Dokoupil was reportedly a frontrunner for the job and even caught the attention of future CBS editor-in-chief Barry Weiss's publication, The Free Press, back in October of last year, when Dokoupil confronted author Ta-Nehisi Coates on CBS Mornings over the way he framed the Israel-Hamas war in his new book. Take a listen.
I took your name out of it, took away the awards and the acclaim, took the cover off the book, the publishing house goes away. The content of that section would not be out of place in the backpack of an extremist. You write a book that delegitimizes the pillars of Israel, it seems like an effort to topple the whole building of it. What is it that so particularly offends you about the existence of a Jewish state that is a Jewish safe place? Why is there no agency in this book for the Palestinians? They exist in your narrative merely as victims of the Israelis, as though they were not offered peace at any juncture, as though they don't have a stake in this as well.
The Free Press later broke the story that CBS leadership was allegedly admonishing Dokoupil for how he handled that interview.
Dokoupil may not have been the only talent on Weiss's radar, though. She reportedly expressed interest over the last few weeks in poaching several big names to lead the show. Those names included Fox News' Brett Baer, who is under contract, and CNN's Anderson Cooper, who was reportedly too expensive for the network. I did not know that. But despite chasing after big names, some weren't at all surprised to see Dokoupil's name come out on top. Mehdi Hasan, writing on X, quote, pro-Israel guy gets top job from new pro-Israel boss and new pro-Israel owner. Surprise!
Well, I mean,
Well,
look,
I'm much more pro Mehdi Hasan than you are, but we won't get sidetracked with that. I'd like
very
the guy.
much not.
Defend him anyway.
Tony Dokoupil, he has leading man energy. I think he's a fine choice. I know people of the more anti-Israel persuasion were not, or some of them at least, were not happy about that interview. I don't know. I thought it was a fine interview. It was maybe more aggressive than is often characteristic of a morning show type energy, but I didn't think the questions were unfair. And frankly, to Ta-Nehisi Coates' credit, he didn't complain about it. It was people complaining on his behalf. He's a big boy. He's a smart person. He engages in the realm of debate. He is a strident and aggressive critic of people he disagrees with. So I did not think it was really unfair to put him in the hot seat, so to speak. Now, I'm not sure that format is the best format for really getting at important differences of opinion on the Israel issue, but I don't think it was wrong that he went that direction if he felt like it. And I other than that, I'm not overly familiar with the kind of things he does, but he's not some unacceptable choice, certainly, to me.
This may surprise you, given my broadly pro-Palestinian views, but I'm not in a state of outrage about this particularly itself. I do think, in regards to that Ta-Nehisi Coates interview, to my mind, the debate I think there is whether that kind of interview seemed incongruous on a mainstream network morning show. Because when he was rebuked by one of his bosses, one of the issues was that the boss is saying something to the effect of, we're not here to represent a viewpoint. Now, you and I kind of are here to represent viewpoints, right? It's a different kind of show. And there are all kinds of media forum where you go in expecting or knowing what the host or co-host's basic viewpoint is going to be. So I do think that interview was debatable, but I also, within the construct of a CBS morning show.
It was not a breezy morning book. It is a
book about
incendiary book on a provocative topic.
Yeah.
And he has strong views that are contrary to that aspect of the book.
Right.
And if somebody had positive views, I don't know. This is not the best format, is a morning show of that kind to go over that.
Right.
But if we'd had Ta-Nehisi Coates on Rise, even though I am not particularly animated by opposition to him on that specific issue, I might have, to fairly represent a more pro-Israel view, asked aggressive questions, and you would ask friendlier questions, and that's kind of the premise of a show that is not fundamentally unlike their show.
Right. And as far as Tony Dokoupil is concerned, I mean, I just think let's judge him on how he does once he takes over as anchor, and if he, people, criticize everybody in the media, including us at times, and that's fine. It's fine to have fair criticism and to judge people on their performance. Now, to be clear about this, I'm much more skeptical, as you're well aware, about Barry Weiss's role at CBS, given her identification with, I would argue, very pro-Israel positions to a degree that they have often, to my mind, minimized Palestinian suffering or tried to rationalize away Israeli misdeeds, and it seems, I think, fairly obvious that element of her public and journalistic persona was something important to the new owners of CBS as they shifted away from what I would argue was a more frankly journalistically impressive model to a more ideologically driven right-wing and pro-Trump model.
I mean, what is so interesting about that, though, is that it is not really exactly what Trump or a Trump base wants either. Is that sometimes that perspective is frankly at odds a little bit with what the Trump base is clamoring for, what the very online people were describing, also have non-interventionist foreign policy. So I'm going to be interested to see how her, in some ways more establishment, but not Trumpist necessarily, views come into conflict with an audience. They might be, if they're seeking a more right-of-center audience. I don't think Trump himself cares either way, but that will be interesting to see. I think we just have to judge the product by its merits. The kinds of people she's wanted to hire. Brett Baer is I think a great news reporter who has a great hour of news on Fox. Anderson Cooper, I like, actually. I enjoy a lot of what his programming does. He gets criticized sometimes. That's fine. So, she has sought reasonably talented people that, frankly, anyone in that position would seek out.
While we're on the topic of anchors, I don't know if this is influencing my generous assessment of Tony Dokoupil or not, but people often complain that women are identified by who they're married to. I, as not a huge viewer of CBS Mornings, think of Tony Dokoupil as Mr. Katie Tour, and Katie Tour is actually my favourite MSNBC anchor.
Oh, are they married?
They're married.
Oh, I had no idea.
Indeed they are.
Oh, good for them.
It's good for them. So perhaps that makes me, by proxy, slightly more pro Tony Dokoupil than I would otherwise be.
Oh, that's
no
idea.
I would hope that she stays at MSNBC and resists any temptation to lure her, if there ever is one, over to CBS.
Of course, the overarching issue, which we've talked about a couple times, is whether Bari also acquires CNN as part of her growing empire, because there's the hostile takeover bid that Paramount has to try to get Warner Brothers and CNN, which is under them. Because right now they're going to Netflix, but CNN's not going to be part of that deal, and they're going to hammer it. And part of it, unfortunately, dagger to my heart, hinges on who's going to flatter Trump more.
Yeah,
it's a bad system, in my view, where the federal government has a veto power.
Well, and he'll use every bit of that veto power and every bit of that leverage, I would imagine.
Yeah, we will see.
It's not a great scenario in my view. Anyway.
Up next, Elon Musk is revealing why he would not do DOGE again. We'll be right back after this.
Billionaire Elon Musk, you might have heard of him, says he would not lead the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, if he had his time again.
In an interview on the Katie Miller podcast on Tuesday, Musk gave his reflections on the success of DOGE, or lack thereof. Let's take a listen.
We're a little bit successful. We were somewhat successful. We stopped a lot of funding for that really just made no sense. That was just entirely wasteful.
Miller, who worked as a spokesperson for DOGE and is married to President Trump's top policy advisor, Stephen Miller, asked Musk, quote, "Would you do DOGE again, knowing what you know now?" And this was his response.
Instead of doing DOGE, I would have basically built, worked on my companies, essentially. So, and the cars, they wouldn't have been burning the cars.
You gave up a lot to do DOGE.
Yeah. Like if you stop money going going for political corruption, they will lash out.
Musk also talked about massive transfer payments being made to bring in illegal migrants. He said Representative Ilhan Omar literally was voted into power by large groups of people from Somalia, or Mandani, who was voted to be mayor of a majority of people who were not born in America.
Elon Musk wasn't born in America.
That's true. He was not born in America.
I mean, I find we could get onto the DOGE stuff in a second.
Cautionary tale about the danger of immigrants?
I wish we could have kept him out, but sadly we were unable to do so. Look, I mean, I find his kind of race-baiting stuff perhaps the least attractive part of him. As you know, I have all sorts of issues with him on all kinds of different topics where I think he propagates on X terrible misinformation a lot of the time himself. I mean, I'm not talking about whether the platform is censored or not. I'm talking about stuff he pushes. DOGE, I thought, was a bad thing overall. Not
Sounds
least,
like he kind of thinks it was too.
I know. So at least we have some point of agreement there. I mean, just briefly, Robby, on the complete sort of defenestration of USAID, I thought that was terrible, and I did not think that the purported wasteful spending that was saved or eliminated remotely made up for the completely hollowing out of aid to people who are in really dire straits.
I am interested to hear him say that he somewhat regrets spending any time at all on DOGE and that he should have been working on his companies. Frankly, I think the most good Elon does for planet Earth and the human civilization is his companies, which are amazing, and which is why I could never, people like to say, oh, he's a moron or he's an insane person. He acts very frenetic on social media, but you can't do Tesla and SpaceX and everything he's done without having some underlying manic competence that he clearly manifests. If we make, the Waymos, if we get driverless cars kill. I was saying this the other day to someone, maybe to you, I can't remember, who I have conversations with. We do so many people, so much commentary, so much video commentary. More people die in car crashes every year than just about any other than heart disease or cancer. It's like the number one killer of human beings. If we could get driverless cars that are, and so far all of our research suggests that driverless cars are by an order of magnitude safer than driving by yourself. If in 10 years we have most people in the country driving driverless cars, we could save thousands of lives every year. That is a better use of Elon's time to work on. It just is, to work on that company. And I hope he really, I say this in a positive toward Elon way, I hope the lesson he takes from this is to double down on his companies, on making great products, on getting us to Mars, on getting us driverless cars, driverless electric vehicles. More of that, please.
Think of how many lives we could save if we just repealed the Second Amendment and banned all the guns, Robby. Perhaps you might join me in that life-saving enterprise.
We cannot do that.
Well, we can in the end, but it'll take a few decades.
We're not going to be doing that.
It'll take us a few decades to get there.
I think that's going to happen.
In relation to one of the things that has always perplexed me about Musk is his business success, because I agree with you objectively or empirically. He obviously does have real ability in that realm. You can't just get
lucky that many times.
You can't, and yet it's so incongruous to me with his persona, which, among all other things, seems completely incapable of filtering out what information is true from what is false. And I don't see how that guy can bring the same quality to business and have success. He must be more judicious in what he does in business, I assume.
Yeah, I think he must be. Well, that does it for us today on Rising Live. Look out for more exclusive YouTube content coming your way later today. And please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Hills YouTube channel so that you never miss any content. And for those of you who listen while on the go, of course, we are now available anywhere you listen to podcasts. And we will be back here tomorrow for our Thursday show. See you then.